So, today it's my great privilege to introduce and to welcome Jamie Smart, who's a coach, consultant, trainer, and mentor. And I've trained with him, as have all of us. Jamie is the author of 2 books, Clarity and Results, and also their shorter versions. Jamie. And he's a Sunday Times bestseller. And he's been a huge force introducing the principles behind Clarity to the UK. So we're all graduates of his training outfit, the Clarity Academy. And I think there are hundreds of certified Clarity coaches now. Is that right, Jamie?
Yeah. Well, so hundreds of people have been through the program. Somewhat fewer than the total have been certified as Clarity coaches. But everyone's either been certified as a Clarity coach or a Clarity practitioner, depending on whether they've met the certification criteria.
Yeah. Great. So I'm going to be chairing this meeting, if you like. And I'm going to start by introducing Julie. Julie, it's over to you.
Thank you, Sorrel, and hello, Jamie.
Hi.
So we love hearing your stories, and one of my favourites is when you talk about your sort of early introduction to the principles behind Clarity and how you had a really huge insight that changed the direction of your business. But I'd just love to hear it again, if you would share that story with us, please.
Yeah, well, it was kind of the third of 3 insights, and I don't know if everyone listening will know, but when I was first introduced to this, I was kind of like, oh, this is not interesting. But I was exploring it, and my first insight was, everything you've been looking for outside of you is already there within you in terms of the feelings of security and well-being and peace of mind. I kind of heard that from lots of spiritual teachings, but I'd known it intellectually, but I hadn't known it kind of in my heart, in my body. And I went from not knowing that in my heart to knowing it like I know my own name. Still lose sight of it, but that was a game changer for me personally. Then I had another insight, which was, the fact that a person can even see or hear or feel or experience means they have innate well-being and mental health. They already have within them the source of resilience and realization and transformation. And that was a game changer for how I work with others, how I connected with clients and loved ones. And like that changed everything. But the third one happened halfway through that first year. And I up till this point, I'd seen it as kind of like, this is an interesting methodology. And, my background I'd been an NLP trainer, and I'd learned tons of methodology. I'd explored NLP and CBT and RET and everything that has 3 initials. I'd explored it. I'd explored, Buddhism and Sufism and one of my favorites, the whole Lao Tse, that whole domain, which the name of it's totally escaped me at the moment, but nevertheless, I'd been around the houses. And so I thought this was just another one of those, another way of pointing and that sort of thing, just another interesting approach. But I heard people in the field saying, this is principles, this is truth, and I'm like, man, everyone says that what they do is truth, but that's just another belief system. And then one day, it was June 2009, so like 11 years ago, almost to the day. That was my mindset and that sort of thing. And I was at a mastermind group, and during this mastermind group, we watched a video of Sid Banks. I thought that was interesting, and I'd never seen him before. I'd heard him, but I hadn't seen him. And I went to sleep that night. And the next morning when I woke up, I was like, it's principles. It's principles. I get it. This is foundational. This is describing something that's already happening. And it was an insight. And what I saw was, this is to psychology what the discovery of germ theory was to medicine. And I had a vision that was that just like you and me and everyone we know, we're born to parents who already know about germs. I had a vision of the first generation of children born to parents who already know that no one's broken, they don't need fixing, that we have this innate capacity for resilience, realization, and transformation already there within us. And, I called my office, I said, we're changing direction. There's principles and that changes everything. And so I left the field of NLP, and I've been looking in this direction ever since, and doing my best to raise awareness of it. That's what had me write the books. That's what has had me do pretty much everything I've done, is with the aim of establishing this understanding as an orthodoxy. And here's the thing, we're still very early in the game. Like, it's a long way to get to the point where everyone's like, yes, of course. But here's the thing that I never realized. I had always said, yeah, once we get to that point when every adult knows it and the children are born into that generation, then the work is done, kind of thing. But what hadn't occurred to me is that there are parents right now who understand this and are having kids right now. So that generation is already being born, and that changed things again. I realized, so actually my folks, rather than some future far off thing, it's right now helping a generation realize that capacity for clarity and realization and transformation that they have within them right now. So it's so cool.
And those of us who are parents, even of older children, we're sharing it with them as well. So that next generation is already starting.
Yeah.
Even if they haven't been born into parents who've got an understanding of the principles behind clarity.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jamie. Loved hearing it again. And I have to pass you over to Gary.
Hi, Gary. Thanks, Julie.
Afternoon, Jamie. Good to see you here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. Interesting. The question I wanted to ask, you've just alluded to some big changes that have happened, obviously, in the last 11, 12 years. But what I thought of asking is, knowing what you know now and the experience you've gone through, what would you say to the former Jamie who was starting up your business back in 98, 99? What advice would you take back and hand back to yourself?
I'll tell you exactly what I do. So in 98, 99, here's the thing. I couldn't have planned it better than it's turned out, right? Like, if I look back, the way things have turned out hinged on a handful of insights and realizations, a handful of unexpected events, a handful of people who I met, and that sort of thing. So I'm not saying like, I wish it were all different, but back in 99, I was given a copy of The Missing Link, a book by Sid Banks. And Sid's the guy who first articulated this understanding in this way of principles. He had a amazingly deep, profound insight into who we really are and to how experience is created. And he devoted the rest of his life to sharing this understanding. And it's because of Sid's insights that we're having this conversation today. Anyway, I got given this book by someone, and they told me about what they were doing. They said, yeah, we're kind of doing counseling with people in corporate. We take them for a few days and we counsel them. And I was really into NLP. And as far as I was concerned, NLP was the best thing since sliced bread. And so I was kind of like, that sounds shit, but I'll read your book. So I get given this book, and I look through it, and there's a preface written by Judy Sedgman. And at the end of her preface, she says, no one can read this book without being touched and inspired. And I was like, we'll see about that. Because I'm very disagreeable. So if someone says something like that, I take it as a challenge. So I read it, and I was like, yeah, simplistic. I already know that, and it's not that simple, blah, blah, blah. If I could have said something to the me of back then, it would be, Jamie, I know you think you're open-minded, and I know you think you already know everything, but there are worlds that you haven't seen yet. And, last weekend, we had the last weekend of Clarity certification, as you know, you guys were there. And one of the things is we were kind of just rounding up, and people were saying what they've taken from this program. They said, I've got things from this program that I didn't even know were on the menu. Not that they didn't know were on the menu in the program, that they didn't even know were on the menu in life. And that was me back in 98, 99. There are things that, like, I read this book now, it's one of my favorite books, and I can read like a sentence and just be like blown away and taken and shown things that I didn't even know were on the menu in 1999. So if I could say anything to the me of way back then, I would say, it's funny. I got an email from someone yesterday who said, "Hey, Jamie, I've explored your stuff, but, I've heard it a million times before. You're saying, our thoughts create our experience, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, man, it's not that. What you've done is you've taken something profound and extraordinary and impactful, and you fitted it into something you already know, which is what I did. And if I could have said anything, I said, you need to learn to listen better. You need to open your mind to the possibility that there are worlds beyond anything you've ever experienced. And that if someone who you respect is saying, there's something to see here, that's worth listening to and spending some time with, and really giving it the old college try to really see if you can see what they're pointing to. Because, man, I don't have any regrets at how it turns out. But if I'd seen this 10 years earlier, I would have had 10 years of training with Sid Banks. I would have had 10 years of not having so much suffering and worry and struggle in my life. And I would have made a difference. I made a difference over those 10 years where I wasn't teaching this, where I wasn't teaching NLP. I had a great time. I learned lots of cool stuff. I made a lot of difference to a lot of people. I would have made a bigger difference if I'd known this stuff. So again, no regrets. I'm happy. I got nothing to complain about. Life is so sweet. But if I could say one thing to the me of back then, it would be, there's something to see here. Listen, open your mind, and do whatever you need to do to find out what's going on here, because this is the real deal. That's what I'd say to the me of back then.
That's beautiful, Jamie. Thank you. Thank you for that.
You're very, very welcome. Great question. I loved it.
So we're with Rob now. Rob, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Rob.
That's true. Sorry, there was some noise outside. So, Jamie, one of the things that strikes me is when a lot of coaches get started, one of the bits of advice they always get is to find their niche. So I'm interested in your take on should coaches find a niche, and also interested in your journey from when you came across, well, when you actually discovered the principles to where the clarity business is now.
So let me do the niche question first. So in my opinion, the advice to a newbie coach to find their niche is terrible advice, because a brand new coach doesn't know enough about themselves and how they work and what they like and that sort of thing to know. And I remember there's a movie which I really loved with Will Smith and Matt Damon called The Legend of Bagger Vance. Highly recommend it. Great movie. The lead character played by Matt Damon, who I think is Arjuna is his name. I think the whole movie's based on the Bhagavad Gita, but anyway, he's lost his swing. Basically, he's a professional golfer who's lost his mojo. He's drinking, he's rubbish. And one night he's hitting golf balls off into the field in the night. And the Will Smith character, who's Bagger Vance, comes rocking up. And the Matt Damon character says, I've lost my swing. I've lost my swing and I can't find it. And the Will Smith character just kind of gets him into the moment and gets him in present. And he said, you can't find your swing. You got to let your swing find you. And I think for every new coach who's been told that they need to find their niche, I'd say, you can't find your niche. You got to let your niche find you. You got to get out there, experiment, and work with a bunch of different people and find out what you like and find out what you don't like, and don't take someone else's idea of what you should do or what you shouldn't do. There are foundational things you can learn, absolutely, but you need to discover what you're about as a coach and what you enjoy as a coach, because to me anyway, the power of being a great coach comes from knowing yourself, and knowing what you like, and knowing what you don't like, and knowing what you're good at, and knowing what you're not good at, and finding out where your stumbling blocks are, and all that sort of stuff. And that's not called finding your niche. That's called experimenting and exploring and discovering. And if you do that, if you follow those enthusiasms and those things, your niche will find you. It'll find you. And what at any point in that journey, you might experiment with saying, okay, I'll create something for soccer moms, or I'll create something for business owners, or I'll try working with people who have, struggles with anxiety or whatever. Like, do a million experiments, choose audiences, try stuff. Absolutely. But don't make it about you and your special niche. That's bullshit. Do what you were drawn to in the first place, which is coach people. Get out there and coach people, and your niche will find you. And there may be some stuff to learn and some stuff to figure out. There may be some, if a coach has been coaching for 3 years and they've been doing a lot of the work and they know what they're good at, and they're still trying to figure out my niche, then we can have a chat and say, okay, well, let's find out what the patterns are. But most new coaches, they haven't got enough experience to know what the answer to that question is. So that's my take on that, Rob. I've never answered it like that before either. So that's kind of yeah. You really touched me with that question, actually.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks, Jamie.
There was a part 2 to your question.
Yeah, so
I remember it. I can tell you the 4-hour version, the 40-minute version, the 4-minute version, or the 40-second version. Which one would you like?
We'd better have the 4-minute version, I guess.
Okay. So I used to be a software project manager, and then got into business program management and change management with large organizations. I didn't much like the work, but I felt like that's what I had to do because I didn't know how to do anything else. And I'd kind of fallen into it, and I had a knack for it, and it was well paid, but it wasn't what I was passionate about. And then I went on a NLP training course in 1998, so 22 years ago. And I had 2 insights. First insight, you've been choosing this and you didn't even realize it. I thought this life had just happened to me. I didn't realize that I'd had any part to play in it. And I realized, you're co-creating this. You're making choices in this. So it's like, in that case, I can choose differently. I can do whatever I want to do. I don't have to be a software project manager. I don't have to do IT projects. Cool. And then the second insight I had was, I want to do that. And that was the guy at the front of the room was a trainer, a speaker, a coach, doing all this cool stuff. And it just looked so amazing to me, but I was terrified of public speaking. So I went on a journey. I quit my job a couple of weeks later, went on a journey to learn how to do public speaking and get over my fear of that. I wanted to develop an exquisite degree of ability for working with groups or working one-to-one with people. So I little bit of obsessive. I spent hours every day just working on that and developing my skills and abilities. I really threw myself into it. Started a consultancy with a buddy of mine, which we did through 2001, 2002, and managed to keep the lights on. Then we went our separate ways. I started my first company, Salad, in 2003, and it was an NLP training company. I grew a community of 90,000 people, so a big list. Created lots of stuff, created lots of products, had a lot of fun, taught stuff I loved, created all this language stuff. And, I was really known for language and linguistics. And then I got to kind of 2008 and something was missing. I was off track. I was off purpose. And so I decided, I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek and went on my first mini retirement, a 3-month ski holiday to Whistler in Canada. And after 6 weeks, I was miserable. So I was like, what's wrong with this picture? So I had to go back to the drawing board. And that was the beginning of 2009. And that's where we picked up before. I had those 3 insights, the third of which was, this is principles. This is the future of psychology. And ever since then, the journey's been, okay, so if this is principles, what does that mean? Well, it's literally, as soon as I saw that day, I called the office. I'm like, we're getting out of the NLP business. There's principles. This is a game changer. There's a wave. It's time to do something different. And then I started training. I went on training courses. I went on intensives and got coached. I just did whatever, because I knew, like, if this is what I'm going to be, same thing I'd done in 98 in a way, is like, if this is what I'm going to be doing with the rest of my life, I better get into action. And so I did that. And I found that with the principles, my whole mastery mindset, which is just practice your ass off and that sort of thing, it didn't really work so well. So I had to discover a new way of learning and exploring and growing. So that was 2009, 2010. 2010, I started running retreats and sharing this understanding with people. I ran my first big event, If the Secret's So Great, Where's My Ferrari? And then basically, because I had the insight, the rest of the world is looking in the opposite direction. I was like, if you want to really embody this in your life, you need to surround yourself with a group of people who are looking in the same direction. You need to really create community around this. So that's what I started to do. 2011, ran Three Principles University, which set the cat amongst the pigeons in the principles community. But I had great Three Principles trainers flying in to teach my clients, my students, and to co-present with me and that sort of thing. 2012, my book Clarity came out. I've been saying all year that it was 2013, but I just checked and I'm wrong. It was 2012. Then Little Book came in 2015. When Clarity came out, we launched the Clarity certification training the same year. We called it Clarity Coach Training back then, but we changed the name to Clarity Certification. 2016, Results came out. I'm pretty sure it was 2000. No, I know it was. Results came out. That became a Sunday Times bestseller. 2019, we launched Clarity Pro, and Clarity Pro puts our community right at the heart of our business. And so now what we're working on is really the thing. I guess the thing that we had done historically is we'd said, yeah, learn the principles because it can help with all these things. You know, learn it for performance, or learn it for business results, or learn it to grow your practice, or learn it to have a bigger impact. The thing that's brand new about Clarity Pro, which has been going a little over a year now, that I'm really excited about, it puts the principles front and center. Says, this is what we're about. This is what we do. Because here's the thing. 10 years ago, everyone was saying, oh, it's so hard to get people interested in the principles. 5 years ago, I walked into W.H. Smith's, and in the top 10 bestsellers list on W.H. Smith, W.H. Smith's is the UK's biggest bookshop, top 10 was my book, Clarity, Chantel Burns' book, Instant Motivation. Chantel was the first coaching client who I taught this understanding to. So Chantel was my client for a year. And the first year, it was 2009, I was working with Chantel and Elaine Halides. Basically, they bless them for this, were my guinea pigs as I was learning this understanding. And so Chantel's book was in number 2 slot. Michael Neal's book was in the top 10 as well, Inside Out Revolution. Was like, okay, there's an audience for this now. 3 books in the top 10 on the principles, boom. So then it's like, okay, now what next? Let's put the principles front and center, and that's what we're doing now. So it's been an amazing journey. And you guys, you were all on the next stage in it because you were the beta test group for the more guinea pigs, bless you all, for the Clarity Advanced Coach and Facilitator program. We were testing all new, really cool stuff that I've never taught before, and it was incredible. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with the world and making everyone else annoyed again. So yeah, it's exciting times. That's the 4-minute version. I don't know how long it took, but
I think it was 6 minutes. But
oh my God, well, I've spoiled everything now.
Well, I'm next up for a question. So, Jamie, you and I have talked a lot about illness, and particularly about chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was just wondering, if you could talk a bit about your understanding of innate wisdom in relation to the body and health, that kind of health.
Well, there are a couple of ways that it looks to me. The first is that, and the person actually who's had a huge impact on me and my own understanding with this is Dr. Bill Pettit. Bill's a psychiatrist, a board-certified psychiatrist in the US, has been working with this understanding for many, many decades, including with people with serious mental health diagnoses, like very serious mental health diagnoses, but also with physical problems and physical expressions of that of one way or another. And what I learned was that, and this really squares with my experience, is that many of the illnesses that people experience in modern day Western society are the result of chronic mental stress. Basically, living in a constant or near constant or habitual state of fight or flight. Our fight or flight system has developed to save our lives. Once every 24 to 48 hours, it can get us out of danger. Like if you stop and think about it, the average bunny rabbit, a day in the life of the average bunny rabbit in the wild is like a day in the Vietnam War. There are, eagles coming in trying to eat them. There are ground predators. There's all kinds of stuff. And yet the average bunny rabbit spends most of its time, as best I can tell, eating carrots and having sex. And they don't have to go to psychiatrists, and they don't have to take medication, and they're not dying of stress-related illnesses. Whereas most of the illness in Western society is stress. And so it looks to me like that kind of chronic alarm state that leads to so many health and illness conditions, that's a function of a misunderstanding of how our experience is created and of who we really are. And the moment, I'll give you a great story about this. So one of the people who went through Clarity certification, not this year, but the previous year, Mike George. Mike got to the 5th module of Clarity certification. And we were just checking in. What are people noticing since we were last together? And he said, well, here's something interesting. He said, for the last 20 years, I've had chronic high blood pressure. He said, and it's been so bad, like 200 and something over 100 and something. I can't remember the numbers, but really, really bad. He said, it's been so bad. I've been to all the doctors, and they've checked me out fully. They can't find anything wrong. So they've said, it must be something psychological. He said, but I tried everything and nothing worked. He said, and I kind of given up on it. He said, came on this program. We're 5 months in. I went to the doctor. I don't have high blood pressure anymore. And here's the thing that's interesting about that, Sorrel. Mike and I hadn't talked about it. He hadn't been working on it as one of the coaching topics. But as he started to get glimpses of how experience is created and who we really are, it had started to subtract a misunderstanding from his perception that had been creating that chronic mental stress and creating that high blood pressure. And it's why I refer to this as subtractive psychology. It doesn't give you something to do or practice or memorize or work on or implement. It's an understanding-based model. And as you have glimpses, as you deepen your understanding and realize the truth of what's already true about you and what you've got going for you, it's literally going to subtract stress and misunderstanding and contamination from your experience and leave you free to enjoy life. So that's my first answer to the health and illness question.
What was your second answer, Jamie?
Well, there's a wisdom and intelligence behind life. And the wisdom and intelligence behind life is resident in every cell in our bodies, in every fiber of our being. That our true nature is already that healing capacity. It's already who we are, that actually all that wisdom and intelligence within us is endeavoring in each moment to bring us back to the truth of who we really are and bring us back to that blueprint, if you like, of who we really are and how we're meant to be, physically and mentally and emotionally. And the stuff that gets in the way of it, and there's stuff that gets in the way of it for all of us, by the way, but the stuff that gets in the way of it is just misunderstanding. It's misunderstanding of who we really are and how experience is created. And those misunderstandings, they present an obstacle to full healthy function. But as people see through those misunderstandings, full healthy function is restored. So that's what happened to Mike. That's what happened to me, like physically, my health and well-being and exercise and all that kind of stuff has transformed over the last decade, over the last 15 years. That's what I see in all kinds. I was being interviewed the other day by someone who, this will seem like a very minor example, but this person it was a similar thing, 3 or 4 months into clarity certification, she stands up. It's the strangest thing. For the last 20 years, this is a microphone, by the way. For the last 20 years, my husband is Angela. Not the microphone's not Angela, the person talking. I'm impersonating Angela with the microphone. This conversation isn't going any further until we get clear on who's called Angela and which one's the microphone. So anyway, she goes, my husband had been on at me for 20 years to stop biting my nails, and I hadn't been able to do it. And then the other day, he said, do you realize you haven't bitten your nails in over 3 weeks? She hadn't even noticed. But the nail biting had been a symptom relief mechanism for all the stress she was carrying around in her head. And as her levels of peace and well-being increased and the stress levels dropped, she stopped needing to do that. And I've seen that not only with nail biting, but with cigarette smoking, alcoholism, with drug use, with acting out type behaviors, and all the knock-on effects of health that show up with that. So what I want to say to anyone listening is there's a wisdom and intelligence resident in every cell in your body and every fiber of your being and at the core of your nature that already knows exactly what vibrant health looks like for you and is already doing its level best to bring you back into alignment with that. And as you wake up to the truth of this, it just kind of eases the path and you'll find your way home. And here's the thing. I don't want to make that like that's a big promise, like, because it's going to be like, for me, it's taken years and years, and I've been, I've had insights and that sort of thing, but it's sort of like peeling an onion. It goes one layer at a time, one layer at a time, one layer at a time. But I've never come across anything more powerful.
That's beautiful, Jamie. Thank you. Jill, so over to you now.
Hi, Jamie. So we're going to put the spotlight now away from your professional knowledge and onto your personal life.
Uh-huh.
So you mentioned earlier that you felt a much deeper connection in your relationship since you started exploring the principles. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that? But also, being an old romantic, can you tell us the story of true love?
Yeah, sure. Well, so
true love. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jillian. Well, so the general one in my personal life was when I really struggled to listen to Sydney Banks at first. And so I asked for advice. How should I listen? Because how I was listening was like very intellectually trying to make sense of what he was saying. And that just didn't work. And someone said to me, well, you need to listen for a feeling. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? But I tried I asked lots of people, and they said, well, listen like you're listening to music that you enjoy, or listen like you're, eavesdropping on a conversation, or listen like you're listening to music or a radio show, or listen like you're just enjoying yourself, like you're not trying to get anything from it. And what I found as I experimented, it was hard. Like it took me a while to learn to listen in a way that wasn't analytical. But what I noticed was that as I did that, I fell into a feeling of connection. And when I say a feeling of connection, it's like connection to, to another person, to life, to who you really are. And I fell into that feeling of connection. And then it occurred to me, well, if you can listen to Sid like this, you could listen to your clients like this. And I thought, well, if you can listen to your clients like this, you can listen to your daughters and your family and your friends and your loved ones. You can listen to everyone like this. You could, if you could listen to them like this, you could listen to life like this. And so that created a possibility and a direction for me. Now, do I all the time listen like that? No. I'm in and out, in and out, in and out. But having it there as a possibility, a way of listening that opens up that experience of connection that I didn't even know was there. Anyway, so that was a real game changer. And then a couple of years ago, I was having coffee with my dear friend and colleague, Jan Chipman. And we were talking about relationships. And at the time, I was in a relationship with someone who my relationships tended to be very tempestuous and that sort of thing. But it's funny, actually, before I understood the principles, my relationships would typically last a few months. And so, they would go along fine until the other party did something that, pressed my buttons. And then I was like, hey, it's time to say goodbye. See you later, on to the next one. And so that was kind of a revolving door policy. As I started to get this understanding and started to experience connection, I ended up being in a relationship for quite a few years with someone who I really cared about and that sort of thing. And it was really tempestuous and up and down. So anyway, I was talking to Jan Chipman one day over coffee, and she told me a story of someone who was talking to her about relationships, who had said to her, well, you can have whatever you want if you really want it. You can have whatever you want if you really want it. Now, I'd heard that a million times in my time in the personal development world. But what I'd always heard was, you can have whatever you want if you really want it. Like if you want it so bad, the veins are popping out in your head. If you have a burning desire. And I was always like, well, the thing about a burning desire is it burns. Like, why would I'm not up for that. But that's how I'd always heard it. But I heard when Jan said it, and like that impression I just did, that's the opposite of Jan. Like that's everything Jan isn't. When Jan said it, what I heard was, you can have whatever you want if that's what you actually want. And I had a sudden realization, and I realized that what I actually wanted was true love. And I realized that what I'd been kind of organizing for up until that point was a bunch of stuff that wasn't that. I'd been organizing to avoid getting bored, avoid having my freedom limited, avoid being hurt, avoid having my heart broken, avoid being pinned down, and so I had a relationship that encapsulated all those avoids, avoid getting bored, all those avoids, but didn't have the one thing that I wanted, which was true love. So I said, okay, well, now that I know what I want, I'm going to go for that. And so that's what I did. And that relationship I was just describing, I decided, well, I'll start there. That's the relationship I'm in. I'll start there. But the wheels fell off within months. And so I was out in the world again. And then as time went by, I ended up meeting the love of my life. And we were talking earlier about things that we didn't even realize were on the menu. I didn't realize that the love I have today was even on the menu. I couldn't be happier or more grateful. Well, maybe I could be. I'm open to that possibility, but I'm just like, I feel like the luckiest guy in the world. It's amazing. So yeah, very, 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 very cool.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And what I heard there was that hope that we've all got the possibility of falling in and out of deep connection, but also if there's something that we really want, anything is possible. So thank you for that message.
Thanks, Gillian.
So we're going to have to go back to Julie to wrap up, I think, the final question.
Yes, final question, Jamie. So we've talked a bit about sort of your insights from the past, and also with Sorrel's question about the physical health. You've really brought out for us your, the vision you had about everybody has that innate capacity for well-being and for mental health. And you had the vision about children being born into parents who already have this understanding.
Yeah.
Where are you now in terms of your vision for the future?
Well, the vision's still the same, and it's kind of interesting. You asked me this question at an interesting point. More than ever, I feel like I'm in exactly the right place, and what I need to do is put my attention on nurturing and supporting and encouraging the people who are already on this journey with me, and just helping them to fly and to do their best work and to see what they need to see. And then the chips fall where they may. Like I assume that my vision That may happen in the next 5 years. It may happen in the next 50 years. It may happen in the next 500 years. I don't know if I'm ever going to live to see it, but I know that's the direction. Like now that this is out in the world, you can't put it back in the bag. Like it's all like, germ theory was discovered in like germs were discovered by Leeuwenhoek in the 1500s. It was the late 1700s before a Scottish chap whose name evades me started to talk about, maybe this could be the cause of stuff. Then it was the 1840s before Semmelweis went, oh my God, there's something on doctors' hands and scalpels. Then it's from when he realized that in 1843. So Semmelweis put the puzzle together. He's like, this is it. It was 1880, nearly 40 years later, before the medical orthodoxy with Pasteur and Koch and those guys said, you know what, we've got to take this and take it mainstream, make it the medical orthodoxy. And then it took them 20 years to do that, But by the time they'd finished that 20 years and germ theory had become mainstream, as a result of that, the average human lifespan has increased by 30 years. Imagine that. And that's down to an insight that Semmelweis had, and then the action of a group of people who went hell for leather to take this forward. So I feel like we're in the hell for leather phase. Sid was Semmelweis. Sid was the guy who saw the truth of it. And man, thank goodness for him, and that he left his teachings and that he left his videos and audios. That's amazing. That's amazing. We're in that let's go hell for leather and share this with anyone who will listen, because this is what the world needs, not only in terms of ending suffering or significantly reducing suffering, but I'll end on this. There's a guy called Alfred Korzybski. Korzybski was an intelligence officer in the First World War, so 100 years ago. And Korzybski insightfully realized that while the technology of war, by the time of the First World War, like the First World War was the first industrial strength war, millions killed, like horrific carnage, unlike anything seen before in history. He realized that while the technology of war had come on by leaps and bounds in the time he'd been alive, that the social structures and habits of thinking and perception that gave rise to the war hadn't changed in hundreds of years, that we were still living in this tribalistic, psychologically outdated environment. Well, and he ended up founding the field of general semantics, which ended up being, he's sort of the great-grandfather of NLP, actually. Well, it's 100 years since he had those insights, and 100 years later, technology has accelerated. The technology of war, of commerce, of communication, of everything has accelerated at a dizzying rate. And meanwhile, 100 years later, we still have the same social structures and habits of thought that gave rise to the wars 100 years ago and 500 years ago. And at a time when we've never needed wisdom more in our leaders and as individuals and in our world, we're still living in those old habits of thinking and perception. And so it looks to me like this understanding is the answer to where do we find the wisdom? Where do we find the meaning? Where do we find the solution to that suffering? And where do we find a new direction that offers true hope for humanity to transcend our old tribal evolutionary instincts and live into something more profound and real? And yeah, that's how it looks to me.
Thank you, Jamie. Inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's great to see you here. And thank you for being on the journey with me. I mean, it's such a privilege to be allowed to kind of be your guide in this stage of your journey. It's really cool. I love it. I feel very fortunate. And I love seeing what you're doing with it too.
Thank you, Jamie. That was an amazing 40 minutes, I think. And I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, it's been a great journey with you all the way through from when we all started on this journey with you.
Thank you.
Shall we leave it there and wrap up?
Okay. Have we? So I'm waiting to know. Have we stopped? I don't know. So
We stopped.
Okay, good. That's a good thing to know. So I'm saying.
Yes, we stopped.
Yeah,
We stopped.
That's an important thing.